Hi everyone, welcome back to my YouTube channel, or welcome if you are new here. My name is Grace and today's video is the final video in my strength and conditioning for yoga series. Today we're going to focus on one of my favorite yoga asanas, Shirshasana or headstand. So if you have been working towards this posture for a while, or maybe you want to know a little bit more about it, then keep watching this video. It's going to be a slightly shorter video today, and I would highly recommend that you get yourself warm before you come into this. So maybe a few sun salutations or any of the other short yoga flows on my channel will be just fine. We're going to start down on our mats and we're going to start building from the ground up. So come onto all fours, and from here what we're going to do is just work on a little bit of shoulder engagement before we do anything else. So I'm sure we're all familiar with dolphin pose. We're going to do a few dolphin push-ups, dolphin presses, just to get those shoulders really switched on and engaged, because although the name is headstand, it's actually more in our shoulders. So from your tabletop, drop the forearms, keep the wrists in line with the elbows, tuck the toes, and lift the hips up as high as you can. Now, what we want to do here is make sure we're not collapsing all the way down. We want to really push up through the shoulders, and from here we can begin our dolphin presses. So keep your legs as straight as possible, engage your core, send the gaze towards the thumbs, and gently lower the nose towards the mat, and then push up. We don't actually want to touch the mat with the head. We want to just hover a few centimeters up and off. Breathe down all the way down. Breathe down, breathe in on the way down. Breathe out on the way up. Let's go for 5. Big push, engage those shoulders. 4, for 3, for 2, last one. And I want you to hold here, big push, drive into the forearms, try and lift the hips a little bit higher if you can. Hold for 3, 2, and 1. Well done. Drop onto your knees, sit back on the heels. Nice work. So what we're doing in our dolphin presses is really starting to build a bit of mind-muscle connection with the shoulders. And like I said, headstand is actually built in the shoulders way more than it is in the head. I want you to really try and work on your confidence here with coming away from the wall. We're not going to use the wall at all in this practice today. And if you're using it at the minute, I really advise you to come away from the wall. So there's a couple of reasons for that. The first being, you probably don't need it. I really believe that a lot of yogis are more than strong enough to hold their headstand. It's a little bit of a mental game more than anything. And second of all is because it can get us in a few bad habits. When we headstand against the wall, we can quite often disengage the core and just rely on our feet pushing against the wall instead of actually building from the ground up. It's also a little bit dangerous. It's probably not the end of the world, but if you fall out of a headstand against the wall, your head is quite close to the wall and you're more likely to kind of bang it on the way down. Less important when we're working with Pincha Mayurasana or handstand, but definitely with headstand, it's a little bit of a no-go. I know exactly how you feel if you're clinging onto the wall for dear life. That was me when I first learned headstand, but hopefully with these tips you can help build that confidence to come away. So before you practice headstand, do a few of those dolphin presses just to get your shoulders really switched on, and that movement is going to help us when we come to build the rest of our headstand. So let's think about the alignment with the arms. The way I teach it is with the forearms down. You might be really used to people doing tripod headstand, or you might be doing it yourself. Hands on the mat, head down, and then we would lift all the way up from here. But I'm not a big fan of this headstand. There's quite a lot of pressure going through the neck here, which is not always great for what we want to do. And very similar to headstand against the wall, we can kind of go a bit wobbly with that neck, and that's not what we want. If you're a pro at tripod headstand, you've got some foundations to work with. I would advise you to step away from tripod and work on this variation first. It's a little bit more effective. Okay, so I want you to take hold of your biceps and bring your elbows down onto the mat. Now from here, you can interlace your fingers and just look at your little fingers for me. So what you want is your little fingers to be one in front of the other instead of crossed, one on top. Now this seems like such a strange little adjustment, but all it means is when we're upside down, we've not got loads of pressure going through our fingers and they're not crushing together, which can just be distracting. We've got more important things to worry about, so bring them one in front of the other. With those elbows, you want to make sure they're about shoulder width distance apart. And just while you're here, check in with your hands, make sure those little fingers are free. All I want you to do is recreate that dolphin press, but without lifting the hips. So all you're going to do is drop the head and then push back up. Drop and push. And now when we're in our headstand, what we want to do is keep those shoulders engaged through the whole movement. So that's what I mean in saying that headstand is really in your shoulders. Okay, so what are we doing with our head? The more you practice this, the more intuitive this movement is going to be, and the more you're going to find that sweet spot for you. You're going to drop your hairline onto the mat and bring your hands over your head. Now, if I move my hands out of the way, we'll be able to see the placement of my head. We should be looking towards the back of the mat, but we're not on the crown of the head here. The hairline is down, and those hands are just resting on the top of the head. The little fingers are out of our way, and we're really pushing into the forearms, into the elbows again. Once you're here, I want you to engage your shoulders and think about that head just hovering almost a millimeter off your mat. So it's not coming off, we're just creating that tension in the shoulders. Okay, so from here, let's curl the toes underneath, very similar to our dolphin pose. Push into the forearms and lift the hips high. Now here is your first little thing to check in with once we've started to get upside down. If you can feel a crushing sensation in your head, I want you to drop back onto your knees and work on that shoulder engagement. I know it can be a little bit frustrating, but if we're feeling that crushing pressure in the head, it's what we really don't want. We want to work on keeping those shoulders nice and strong. And then once we've built the appropriate strength, then we can come all the way up. We want to take most of our weight in our shoulders, in our upper body, and you should feel kind of weight in your head rather than a crushing pressure. Okay, so once the hips are lifted, we'll work on getting the legs straight. Only when the legs are straight, the shoulders are engaged, can we work on walking the feet closer to the face. Once you're here, I want you to play with lifting onto the balls of the feet, even onto the tops of the big toes. So we shift our hips over our shoulders while keeping the elbows down. So have a little play with that a few times if you can, always checking in with your head. If you're noticing a crushing sensation, then make sure we come back here, we work on those shoulder presses, or we even work with our dolphin pushes here. Sorry, I'm just going to pull these up. If you're struggling, start that again. If you're struggling to get your legs straight, then I'd suggest you work on some hamstring stretches that are going to help you get them there. Makes everything else a little bit easier. So we've got our shoulders sorted, we've got our hands sorted. Once you've got those hips over the shoulders, what do we do next? How do we get the legs up there? This is the bit of the pose that feels a little bit like magic to me. And this is the bit where most people tend to get a little bit flummoxed. It's where I got stuck. I was like, how on earth does this happen? One day, I promise you, it just clicks. The only difference between somebody who can do headstand and someone who can't is a lot of practice. So don't be put off, stick with it. It's a marathon, not a sprint headstand. Once we are in this position here with the toes coming close to the face, we want to maintain that length in the legs, and you're going to squeeze one knee to your chest, and at the same time come onto the very, very tip of that opposite big toe while squeezing heel to the bum. What we don't want to do is start doing this
or this, or taking the leg out to the side. Keep the elbows down, squeeze the knee in, and then switch. And through doing this, what you're going to find is your more active leg, or where it feels more comfortable for you to take the balance and squeeze both knees to the chest. I like to call this pose meatball pose.
So just to recap, what you're doing is ultimately trying to squeeze both knees tight to your chest, and you've got to take a little bit of a leap of faith there. Now, you're probably already thinking this, I can probably do this, but I'll fall over. That's why I need the wall. I really encourage you to fall. I know that sounds like a strange thing to do. I promise you it's not dangerous as long as you're being sensible with the pose. Please don't practice this pose over and over and over again so all the blood is in your head and you're feeling dizzy. Make sure you're taking appropriate rest, and make sure that you're not practicing this any more than kind of 5 to 10 minutes a day. Even that, I would say, is a little bit too much. Headstand is one of the poses in yoga that really challenges our central nervous system. So if you can dial it down to even a couple of days a week, that is going to be better for you. That process of squeezing both of your knees into your chest and taking that little leap is really the most difficult bit. And unfortunately, I don't have any more tips for you other than to practice it and trust yourself. This is what I said about it being a little bit of a mental game. That process of squeezing in and catching the balance is really where you're going to start getting a little bit of a mind game with your headstand. You're like, oh, can I do it? I'm going to fall. The best way to do this and get more comfortable with it is actually to fall out of it. Once you fall, you learn what you need to do. Okay, so we lengthen through the legs. One knee in, bring that other leg in, push into those forearms and then extend. Legs all the way up. Point the toes and squeeze the glutes. Hold. Well done. Now from here, if you get comfortable in your headstand, you can start working with Shirshasana B. So keep those shoulders strong, keep the legs long, shift your hips back over your shoulders and lower the legs 90 degrees, and then maybe pull them all the way back up and hold. Stay nice and strong through the shoulders, keep the core engaged, and then we can lower down. Try and bring yourself out of headstand with as much control as you can. Well done. After you've done with your headstand practice, come into a child's pose, relax those shoulders, or really take any movement here that makes you feel like you can just release from the pose, maybe a little neck roll. And don't worry, like I said, headstand is definitely a marathon, not a sprint. Don't worry if it doesn't just come straight away. So thank you so much for practicing with me today, guys. I hope you found these headstand tips useful. I hope you find the strength, the courage to come away from the wall. Happy headstanding. Thank you for practicing with me. And until I see you again, namaste.